A book that really struck me years ago was written by Wayne Rollins, and the title was Jung and the Bible. And Wayne went through very meticulously the work of Carl Jung and looked at how it was that it might be related to interpreting and understanding biblical texts. And it's a good fit because Jung himself was uh, the product of a family of preachers. His father was a Lutheran pastor, and I think his grandfather was as well. And so he was just steeped in this world of the Bible. And he himself wrote a bit about that. It's not all located in one place. You have to kind of go through his materials and find uh, where they are, but very interesting work. And it's related to really many of the themes that Jung was looking at. If you take, for example, the process of individuation, you can trace that process through some of the biblical characters. So, for example, if you look at the figure of Jacob in the book of Genesis and the adventures that he goes through, they really follow the lines of that process of individuation, that he comes up to being faced with insurmountable problems. It is the feminine voice that draws him. He's engaged to the daughter of Laban, and that leads him to develop his skills as a lamb trader, as a sheep trader. And ultimately, you see sort of the culmination of his process in that episode of wrestling God by the banks of the river. He meets this dark stranger, and he knows he just has to wrestle this figure, and he wrestles him to a standstill. And in the process is then given a new name, and that's his transformation has been accomplished, and his individuation is complete. So there you see images like that. The Bible is full of images of transformation, of depth, of lots of the things that Jung talked about. And so Jung can be a very useful resource for looking at the Bible and for allowing it to unfold in some new ways, in some depth ways. There are some ways in which Jung can be problematic. And one of the things, there was an interview with Jung at which he said, one of the things for which I am grateful is that I am Jung and not a Jungian. And what that suggests to me is that he was able to grow beyond the Jung he had been. And what's happened now is, since he is no longer with us, he's not been able to grow past that Jung. But there are others who have, like James Hillman, who have been able to expand on the directions and the trajectories that that Jung took, and find new ways of applying his thoughts that are more contemporary and more useful for today.
Hi, Andy. My name is Tim Locke, and I'm executive director of a retreat center, Four Springs. I don't know Andy through interfaith or interreligious dialogue. I'm aware of interfaith dialogue. I'm a Presbyterian, and I don't know any other Baptist clergy involved in interreligious dialogue. So Andy's something of a miracle as far as but it's just a pleasure and it's an honor to recognize you, Andy, and all that you've done for Four Springs over the many years that you've been a part of that. I've been there almost 30 years, and I know you were there before I was. Four Springs was founded by three women who all work with Carl Jung. And at Four Springs, it's the integration of religious wisdom and Jungian psychology and mythology and poetry and music and art. It's something and experiential education with questions. I know that coincides with a lot of your interests, Andy. And you extended that work to a much wider audience through your writing and your editing. And you joined the board at Four Springs at a time, it was a pivotal time for us about 20 years ago, and guided us through the adventures we had of renovating our historic lodge and helping us dedicate that at our 50th anniversary. And then you joined our board again recently, and I wrote in my letter to you that after only a limited and reasonably dignified amount of begging on my part, that you joined us again, and you've helped us to retain our focus and preserve our legacy as we negotiated coming back from losing the lodge that we renovated and building a new lodge that we dedicated in 2014. So you've been a friend and a colleague in preserving and furthering something that we both deeply value and that many of us value. It's hard to define it in just a few words, but it includes an appreciation for the wisdom that we might gain from the teachings of Jesus when they're engaged from a wider perspective and through more lenses than only those of Christian traditions. I just want to thank you, Andy, for all that you've done and all you have given, not only to Four Springs, but to support all of us in sharing our best with one another, with respect for one another. And all of your Four Springs colleagues, past and present, are grateful for your presence in our lives and grateful for the opportunity that we've had to work alongside you.
After the comments about always being filled with wisdom and saying the thing that needed to be said, I feel intimidated. But I've been giving a lot of thought to this, and since it does appear that I have a bit of a singing voice, I will try this. I was either going to sing this or I was going to recite it as a poem, because it started as a poem. And I thought, here it is, my chance to give a message to the troops and to talk about the journey that I've been on and that so many of us have been on, and that I hope will continue long into the future, of companioning one another through this life. And so, for what it's worth, I would take you, if I could, to the top of the mountain, and we could gaze upon the promised land. And we might know for certain where we've been and where we're going. And we could lead the people with the light of God's own promise shining in our eyes. But Moses is no more, and the light within his eyes slowly dimmed and was gone. So we are left to make our way through lonely desert places, following a dim and distant dream. So be my eyes, though we both are blind, and I, though lame, will guide your step, hoping maybe someday round this hill or the next, we may see our home. And in that day we'll learn we were neither blind nor lame, and the light in our eyes was always there. I would take you if I could to the top of the mountain, but we might stay like Moses, entranced upon Mount Nebo, in sight of the promise, yet cold and dead. Thank you all.